You're listening to Sudbury News Talk.
I want to show you something.
Stand by. On the morning shift.
Anything
could happen.
Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift. I'm AJ Walsh. Glad to be here with you, and I'm glad that you are here with us. We're live at CKLU 96.7 FM on the radio. That's, that thing that's in your car that, you're not listening to Bluetooth or your favorite podcast or whatever from your phone. It's actually on the dial in your car. And, we're also streaming at cklu.ca on the internet, so you can stream us by clicking on the Radio Player Canada app logo. You can also download the same Radio Player Canada app by clicking on the logo, downloading it, taking us with you, listening to us anywhere, anytime on your favorite device. And you can also listen to other CKLU programming that way as well, as I know a lot of people do. Welcome if you're from around Greater Sudbury. Welcome if you're from abroad. Grateful to have you listening in or watching on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Sudbury News, youtube.com/Sudbury News. Make sure, if you can, to like any of the channels or pages that we have. Share them. Subscribe, follow, and comment if you're on YouTube or Facebook. Yesterday, I didn't notice any YouTube comments coming through. Sometimes the YouTube comments don't come through. So please, if you're on YouTube and you're commenting and you're like, why isn't he showing it on the screen or why isn't he reading it? It's not because I'm doing that on purpose. It is because sometimes I'm not getting them. Anyways, I'll do my best to read your comments so that way people on the radio can hear them. It's a conversation that we have about local issues and news and issues that we face abroad that everybody can relate to. And it'll be no different today. Our theme this week is the climate. As it's changing into fall here in Sudbury, leaves are all changing. A lot of them are falling off already. And we went from basically summer having to use the air conditioning to very cold and some snow even in Sudbury on Sunday. And having to turn on our heat. So there's that. We'll talk about, that's weather, but we'll also talk about the broader subject of climate and possibly an alternative view than what possibly mainstream talks about. And that's that the science is settled. Science speaks with one voice. There's only one large scientist with a white coat out there that speaks, and everybody listens to science. Dr. Science. But there are other scientists, believe it or not, out there. There's not just one. And many of them still question, which they're supposed to do as scientists, and the questions continue. What is climate? What's going on? Why is it doing what it's doing? Who is impacting it? Are we impacting it? If we are, how much are we impacting it? What should we do, if anything, to try to stop what's happening naturally? Or if it's not naturally, what could we do to help the climate be more livable for people? But there is a movement out there that seems like almost people are the problem, get the people out of the way so that way the planet can continue. And I don't think that's the solution for people. Anyways, people I don't think are going to fare very well if that's the way we're going to go. Anyways, so there's some extreme views. There's what's called climate alarmism, which seems to be the narrative and the mainstream view, right? You need to be afraid. You need to be very afraid. We need to do something now. Stop thinking about it. It's solved. Let's just make policies and let's just move forward. But what are these policies? Who's behind them? Why are they being made? Who benefits? These are the questions that one might ask. So we'll talk about that later after the weather, after the sports update that we have. We've got a little bit of Sudbury 5 news today as well, along with what we can expect from the Sudbury Wolves with their homestand coming up. We got some local headlines. The safe injection site, that's in the news because there's the funding that they're hoping from the province is on hold. Talk a little bit more about that. Then we'll get into our deep dive that I just explained, and we'll come back with your comments and all of that, much more as I stutter this morning. Right after this. And as usual, your Sudbury weather is brought to you by sudburyweather.ca. For all things weather, visit sudburyweather.ca. Here you go, 2 degrees, very cool, and fog. We can expect today to have mainly cloudy skies with a 60% chance of showers or drizzle. Fog patches dissipating this morning. High of 9, UV index 2 or low. Tonight, partly cloudy, 30% chance of showers this evening. Fog patches developing after midnight. +1 is your low for tonight. So again, right around the 0 mark. That's the time of year that we're in. And Thursday, mainly cloudy. Fog patches dissipating in the morning. The wind will be very mild. And high of 12. Again, getting cooler. And the UV index will be 3 or moderate. Again, a look at your long range. Tomorrow, 12, mainly cloudy. 30% chance of showers on Friday, high of 11. Same thing, 30% chance of showers for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. 13 is your high on Saturday. 9 is your high on Sunday. 10 is your high on Monday. Then we finally get a little break in the forecast with a little mix of sun and cloud, high of 11. So we're looking at between 10 and 13 degrees all the way through tomorrow till next Tuesday. So rather cool. And that's your weather. We tried to get a, let's see here. This is your weather as it was yesterday and today. Yeah, they had some more recent weather going on here. And as you can see, just very, very cloudy out there. Lots of activity going on all over central and northern Ontario. Quebec is just a bunch of clouds and a bunch of rain and precipitation activity. And that's your Sudbury weather, brought to you by sudburyweather.ca. We'll be back with a little bit of sports, news headlines, and a deep dive today into the climate. Speaking of weather, we'll be back right after this. And your Sudbury Wolves, as we talked about yesterday, will be doing a homestand. They're returning to the Sudbury Community Arena for the first time in 12 days. And they're going to begin a 4-game homestand. A doubleheader this weekend sees the Pack take on the Attack. And they're back. The Attack as Owen Sound visits for the first and only time this Friday. That's the only time you'll see the Owen Sound Attack here in Sudbury. Following the game, the Wolves face the Ottawa 67s on Sunday. So your game on Friday will be 7:05 puck drop. Get there a little bit early. Get your tickets and get your season memberships so that way you can not miss out on a game and support the Sudbury Wolves, support local sports. So again, Sunday's game, will be 2:00 in the afternoon against the Ottawa 67s for a rematch from their battle on October the 7th in Ottawa. Ottawa won that game. The Wolves receive a major boost with the return of first-round selection Quinton Musty and newly signed Jabril Toure. Musty joins a potent line which includes Evan Conyon, Coach Adelic, and David Goyette. Yes, that just those 3 guys alone should put fear in the opponents Sudbury Wolves are going to have a great year this year. Nick Yearwood has also been making contributions to the Pack's early season success with 3 goals in the team's first 5 games. Fans can pack the den with single game tickets on sale now for both games at greatersudbury.ca/tickets and the Sudbury Arena box office. The Sudbury Arena box office will be open Monday to Thursday from noon to 4 and Friday from 9 to the end of the second intermission. Get your tickets early. Please note tickets available online are at the same price as at the box office. I wonder if certain people were thinking that they were a different price for some reason. All right, so switching gears to Sudbury 5. We haven't been talking about Sudbury 5 very much, but they disbanded the former league that they were in. They're in a new league, and they're going to be having a press conference on Thursday. Sudbury 5 are pleased to announce the details for their upcoming 23-24 season, as well as the debut of the brand new Basketball Super League, in which they are going to be a part of. The media conference is scheduled for 10 a.m. on Thursday, October the 12th, so you'll expect to hear more from us on after that press conference. It'll be featuring speakers which include the Basketball Super League president and former NBA player Dave Magley, as well as the Sudbury 5 head coach Logan Stutz. So anyways, looking forward to hearing more about that on Thursday. That's your Sudbury Sports, brought to you by SudburySports.com. It's Randy Pascal's website. He is that Sudbury Sports guy. Visit SudburySports.com for all the latest in Sudbury Sports. We'll be back with news headlines, your comments, and much more right after this. Okay, and we are back. We are here on this October 11th, 2023, Wednesday, hump day. And we have a bunch of people joining us here online. Want to get to some good morning shout outs as I try and find where we are here. I don't know if I closed us. That doesn't make any sense. No, we're right here. Okay. Here you go. So Judy's first to the party this morning on Facebook. Good morning, Judy. Thanks for being with us. And Monique, good morning, Sudbury, with a sunshine emoji. It would be great to see the sun. I missed the sun. We had so much of it just before this little stint of rain and snow, might add. Denise, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Denise, on this hump day, Wednesday. Belinda, good morning. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Man, I love your one-liners each and every morning. I look forward to those. Thank you very much, and that's true. You got to get up every time. That's what life is for. It's not about how many times you fall. It's about getting up every time you do. Tracy, good morning. And a very cool emoji there. It's very small. I think there's some hearts and a smiley face, which I really appreciate. Tracy, good morning. Danica, heart emoji. Speaking of hearts, good morning. Exclamation point. Vin, morning. Hope you're having a great one. And Vin says, sports related, oldest grandson's first ever high school hockey game today. Should be a fun new change. Awesome. Yeah, we were talking about that last night, a friend and myself, about how cool it is just to see young people, especially when they're in your family, participating in sports. It's just a cool thing to go out and see them having fun, see them, it teaches us so much about life and it's just, there's just so much in team sports. I was, on Thanksgiving, we had the opportunity to share it with a bunch of families, and we get together with a bunch of people. There's, I don't know, 30, 40 of us, something like that, maybe more. And one of the families were the owners and their children of Little Kickers in Sudbury, where they actually look at, it's a franchise. It started in the UK. And we talked about it on the show before. We did a little promo for them. And so it's basically, if you want to wrap your head around it easily, it's like Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts meets soccer. So you get out and there's a lot of teaching and understanding about sports at a deeper level, and you learn about life basically. And instead of just getting rewarded for getting goals or you know uh, winning the game, the children get badges for things like cooperation or team, you know being part of the team, or you're passing a lot more, or you're taking chances, the things, life skills basically. And they start from 18 months, if you can imagine that. And I think they go up to 8 years old. So they go from 18 months to 8 years old. And it's just so great for, instead of just dropping your kids off somewhere or just having them watch TV or whatever, they're learning about life through sport. And I've always thought that as an athlete, and a young athlete myself, there were so many really cool things I've learned through playing sports, personal achievement. You put in a good day hard work, and you get something from it. The more you put in, the more you get out. And last night was the debut of Connor Bedard playing for the Chicago Blackhawks. In the regular season, anyways, we saw him in the preseason, but facing off against his childhood idol, Sidney Crosby. And again, that's what I thought of. I thought of all of the little things that went into that moment of having your first NHL game. All the early mornings, all of the hours spent stick handling in your driveway or taking shots or, and that's an elite athlete. That's someone who wants to excel and go on and become an elite athlete. However, a lot of the things we're learning, you won't be a Connor Bedard or a Sidney Crosby possibly in the sport that you're in, but you can be the best person at work or an amazing student getting good grades because of the things you learned while in sports. So there's transferable skills, and I highly recommend one of the ways to do that would be investigating Little Kickers, it's called. You just go online and type in Little Kickers into Google, and it'll send you their way, and tell them I sent you. Anyways, so let's look at some of the local headlines today from Sudbury.news before we get into a bit of a deeper dive, talking a little bit about what we're worried about in terms of climate. What do we make of it? Are we being told the right things? Is there only one way to think? Are all the questions answered? Those types of things. As soon as we come back after the local news headlines, brought to you by Sudbury.news. It's a local news aggregator where all of the local news is found in one convenient location. So we'll go through some of the headlines here. Okay, so City Council. Bottom line is we need homes. City Council approves contested seniors residence. That's the one in the South End, right? Councillors vote 9-4 in favor of the 6-story, 150-unit complex in the city's South End. We know that was controversial because people who are living around that complex, I think it was only supposed to be 4 floors, and then they wanted to add the 2, and the people were like, hey, wait a minute. That's a little too high. It's blocking the sun. There's other things there. There's a lot more traffic because there's more apartments, things like that. If you're living in the neighborhood, you're concerned. But City Council voted that they're going to go ahead with that particular project. Comment here from Belinda. Okay, yes, to Vin. Okay, so MPs call on province to fund safe consumption site. The spot, as it's its nickname or its official name, which is Sudbury's safe consumption site, the spot has prevented fatal overdoses but risks closure. In January is the sub-headline from the Sudbury Star. MPs Franz Jelena and Jamie West of the NDP representing Sudbury in our province, were there at the press conference with those that run the safe consumption site. They're calling on the province to fund it. I watched and I'll probably have this maybe next week. Maybe next week's deep dive theme will be on safe consumption, whether it's safe, in terms of what it does in our society. Is it the way to go? Is to have people be able to come and inject their drugs at one location safely? What is it? Is it helping? Do we have enough data right now to know if it's going to be beneficial in our community? Are there other ways to look at, the idea of the opioid crisis that we have here? Can we look at other ways? Is it one of the components that should be part of a bigger picture of recovery of the individual and not just harm reduction? So there's that, right? So maybe next week, and maybe we'll have people on who can speak to that. The alternative point of view, if you will, rather than the mainstream one we're just hearing. I heard the executive director, or the person that's running it, I believe it's Amber Fritz, and she was asked, how many people do you think have been saved, lives saved from the safe consumption site that we have in Sudbury? She said, well, had a hard time thinking, well, we don't really, if I had to guess kind of thing, if I had to, I believe it's at least 4, possibly 5 people have been saved from the safe consumption site. And I said, well, that's a little bit ambiguous. How do we know it's saving lives? Like, how did you come up with that? Is there a concrete way to know it's saving lives? Because that's what it just says here. It's prevented fatal overdoses. So, okay, how does it prevent fatal overdoses? What's the data out there? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? Are people happy with it? Anyways, just to get the good, bad, and the ugly on it, we'll have some people that are in the know. They spend time with people that are suffering from addiction and things like that on the show. Get their point of view on it. That's why we're focusing their energy on disseminating Alberta's oil sector, raising the cost of fuel, and making a coordinated effort to funneling it into their climate change agenda. Green energy is not cheap. Okay, so that's going to be for our deep dive today, for sure. Thank you very much for that, Belinda. There's also a floodplain for half the property that required them to go higher rather than 4 stories high and wider. So there are some geographical construction issues for the building in the south end. So thanks for that, Stephen. Sudbury Catholic School Board welcomes 25 international students. They come from China, Germany, Japan, Nigeria, and the Republic of Korea, Spain, Taiwan, Thailand, and Vietnam. So there you go. We're welcoming international students at all levels: high school, college, university. We have thousands of international students in our city. Okay. So let's see here. Next, mural at Cambrian College's multipurpose Indigenous space. The mural's primary purpose is to empower community and foster a sense of belonging among my people, says artist Jessica Sommers. So for more on that, that's from the Sudbury Star. Those 3 articles that I just mentioned are from the Sudbury Star. You can catch them at sudbury.news, where it aggregates all of the news from local news into one place. Northern Ontario's medical school, one step closer to labor dispute. A strike or lockout is possible by the end of the month. I'm going to reach out to a good friend of mine who is basically involved with NOSM, see what he has to say. about that. See if I can get an inside scoop on the possible strike at the Northern Ontario Medical School. Again, the supervised consumption site in Sudbury is losing staff as future funding is uncertain. The supervised consumption site in Sudbury could close before the end of the year without funding from the province. And that's coming from CBC. Okay, so the angle is there's a couple stories been out there that the nurses in Ontario support the safe consumption site. So that was in Sudbury.com recently. We're waiting for funding from the province. They promised it, apparently, before we went ahead. And so we were expecting it to come. The city's been funding this site while we're waiting for the funding, but it's only going to go to the end of the year. So they're like, hey, you better come up with the money you promised us or we won't be able to continue. Province says at first they weren't really kind of responding, but then recently they said, well, actually all of these requests for funding are on hold right now because there was a shooting outside a safe consumption site down south. And so we're reviewing it now to see, if they are safe. Maybe they're attracting a criminal kind of element around them. And maybe there's some spin-off that, maybe the idea of safe consumption is great, but maybe it's doing some other nefarious things that we need to look at the big picture. That's what they're saying. So it's on hold. So how long is it going to take to investigate? How long is it going to take until they make that decision? We don't know. So the safe consumption site will be kind of up in the air. And now people are leaving. The people that are working there are like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to have a job in 2 months. So there's other jobs available. I'm going to apply for them. And so they're facing that. Okay, so Mountain of Mittens campaign is going on in Sudbury. It's put on by All Nations Church. It's the initiative that collects clothing for the vulnerable. That's from CTV Northern Ontario. If you want to know more about that, you can visit All Nations Church website or click on that story to hear more. And it's a great cause for the people that obviously we have a housing crisis, we have a homelessness crisis, we have an opioid crisis, an addictions epidemic in the city, and many, many people are going to need warm clothing as it gets colder and colder. And speaking of that, Northern Police, funded for mental health crisis, 4 Northern Ontario police agencies are getting provincial funding to help support people experiencing mental health crises, as we find a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness are also, it's linked to what they're going through in terms of their mental health as well, right? Now, a lot of Doug Ford haters will appreciate this headline. RCMP investigating Ontario government's plan to open Greenbelt land for development. The RCMP announced Tuesday it has launched a criminal investigation into Ontario Premier Doug Ford's plan to open up Greenbelt land for development. So I know there's a lot of people very excited for him to get his hands slapped, and so should be if any politician does anything that's illegal or goes against what they're supposed to do. There's a lot of regulations and laws that they have to abide by as politicians. And it's great to see accountability. I'd love to see it at the municipal, provincial, and federal level. If people are held accountable by law, politicians and people in power also need to be held accountable. The end of the long dash, followed by the signal, indicates the standard, daylight saving time. Remember that on CBC? And then the beep, the long beep. Well, that's no longer going to happen anymore, ever on CBC. After more than 80 years on the airwaves, CBC has announced it will no longer broadcast the National Research Council's time signal. Yeah, maybe we'll do it on this show then. Just if they're no longer going to do it. I guess since the advent of smartphones, where it automatically sets your time for you and you don't have to worry about that anymore, I guess that's why it's going the way of the dodo. The dodo was a bird that was extinct a long time ago. And so if you say going the way of the dodo, that means it's no longer going to be happening, just like there's no more dodo bird. Fire puts a damper on Elgin Street Mission dinner. After a fire and power outage at the Elgin Street Mission in Sudbury, the city and fire department jumped in with an alternative dinner. That's unfortunate. Elgin Street Mission had a fire. For more on that, visit Sudbury.news and the aggregator section, the main section, and you'll be able to see that story. But it's very unfortunate. Elgin Street Mission does so much good, especially this time of year, right around Thanksgiving, and now Christmas coming up as the weather gets colder. Belinda says, any politician that profits in office from insider information needs to be dismissed and charged. And that is so true. However, I know firsthand that there's been so many incidences where politicians benefit from insider information. Like you would think, especially I know of certain politicians in the United States that have, they've done really good at the stock market for some reason. Like it's almost like they have a crystal ball, and they live in huge mansions and have multiple mansions, and they're just public servants. They're just politicians. If you look at their salary, there's no way they should be able to afford the standard of life that they have and the wealth that they've accumulated. But if you look at their record in the stock market, either they're a savant or they have insider information. And what would you think it would be if you had to guess? Many, many, many politicians are very wealthy. They're extremely wealthy. Some of them are billionaires. And how does that happen? That's incredible. I remember Bernie Sanders, he's very democratic socialist. He's the communist representative, if you will, of everything good in communism. And he's always putting down capitalism. And I remember there were people lined up to go in and see him speak. And someone was interviewing the people and saying, how much did you pay for your ticket? And it's like $900. Said, oh, $900. Who's making that money? Well, Bernie Sanders. How many people are here? How much money do you think he's making off this speaking engagement? For someone who hates capitalism so much, he's making him out pretty good. He has, I don't know how many homes. He's pretty darn wealthy, but yet he's talking about people are getting too wealthy and you need to take down the wealthy and make it more equal for everyone. But it's he's not really showing an example. It would be nice to see them actually set an example, And speaking of climate change, what we're talking about, right? They go to Davos, they sit in meetings, and they lecture everyone about the climate and how everybody's contributing, but yet they're driving around in private jets all over the place. And when questioned that, they're like, well, obviously we're about important business, so we need to be in private jets flying around the earth all the time, but you shouldn't be doing things like that. It's just like, what? Where do you get this stuff from? Anyhow, so speaking of that, let's see here. Financial Post story on climate change. Talking about Canada being the example to the world, even though it makes not even a drop in an ocean of change. If you look at the amount of change Canada can make. So our contribution to CO2 in the world is so low, and we have the highest tax on citizens for climate, the carbon tax. So we're being taxed the most out of any country to make the littlest change. And there are no change. We don't see any changes from the tax either. There's no real, like what's happening. We're being taxed. Okay, what's that doing for the climate? we don't know the correlation, but anyways, even if we were to even if we were to go net zero in Canada, it wouldn't even be a drop in an ocean of change in the world, but yet we're the leaders in this, fight against climate. Anyways, so here's the last bit of this article. Financial Post, you can find it. It's Canada alone ignored by the world for its climate obsession. So you can put that into Google. You can find that. Because the rush to net zero is A, unattainable, B, colossally expensive, and C, without appreciable environmental benefit, it should be a political loser. But true believers, rent seekers, socialist ideologues, mainstream media devotees, and compromised academics inundate the public with hyperbolic fear-mongering, while alternative voices, including reputable scientists who don't self-censor, are banned and ignored. Without determined political leadership to fundamentally change direction, we will fall even further behind a world that is increasingly indifferent to Canada's climate Canada's climate position and what we're doing. It is past time to stop our indulgent moralizing about climate change. We need to reverse policies that are causing severe economic and social damage and start acting rationally in our national self-interest. So the thing is, we don't really know. That's the thing. We don't really know what is happening with climate. That's the answer. We can speculate. We can make an educated guess, and there's two sides to the educated guess, by the way. Not just one saying there's the climate alarmism is vindicated. There's the other side that says we shouldn't be climate alarmists because this is a natural cycle the Earth is going through. So let's just say those are the two sides, and then everything in between. So yet we're making policies based on one side, the alarmism side. And the policies themselves, even though we don't know what the climate is doing for sure, it's not a for sure thing. We are making for sure policies that we can measure and see what they're going to do to impact us in economic ways and in social ways. So we do see that. We see what we're going to do. And I played an example of that from Tucker Carlson yesterday, highlighting what was done in Germany recently and what's going on throughout the world. As they cut back on their fossil fuels and make it, and it's way more expensive because things are going to get, these kind of policies make everything so expensive nobody can afford to live. And then if they want to live kind of cheaply on the cheap and just heat their own homes, they're going out and getting wood. So there's no wood supply anymore because they're buying it all up and wood prices are going through the roof and there's just none left. So they're going into the forest and cutting down all the trees. Now, is that helping climate change? If citizens are going and cutting down all the trees so they can heat their homes? So no, we need trees, right? To help eat up the carbon. They love carbon. Actually, there's more trees now than there's ever been in the world because there's more carbon. And what do trees do? They eat up the carbon. It's like a natural thing. The earth can kind of naturally take care of itself, right? Like the earth took care of itself before we arrived, right? It was here. When we got here, billions of years, it survived. You don't think it can survive us? You think we're too smart to take on the world and kill it? You don't think it has the mechanisms in place to be able to handle some people doing some things? Do you think we can actually kill the world? Like we're that good? And a lot of people out there say, yeah, well, our nuclear power, and if we did all this and we did all that. So it's debatable. Okay? But the earth has natural mechanisms built in. Like when there's more carbon out there, more vegetation grows. And it naturally takes care of that. And that's just one aspect of how the earth it's naturally capable to take on things like this. So here's a few scientists talking here. The everyday person isn't looking at the fact that there's 100 times more property value and inflation has gone through the roof. So they're talking about hurricanes here. When climate alarmists do is they're sort of predators in that they realize the average person doesn't have the time to think and examine every little detail, especially in this day and age where people live paycheck to paycheck and are worried about their jobs. The everyday person isn't looking at the fact that there's 100 times more property value in the way. Inflation has gone through the roof. So that when there's a hurricane now, it's in a place like Fort Myers and hits a place like Myrtle Beach. It's going to do much, much more damage than it did before and cost more. So when they say, oh, this hurricane costs way more money this time, it shows how bad the climate is. Well, it's because, again, there's more property there at a higher value. And so you put those two things together, it just makes for a colossal number in terms of dollars of damage. When asked what concerns him the most as the scientist about the narratives being pushed by climate alarmists, he answered, I care about how climate hysteria and how misinformation drives policy, just like what we're talking about. And these policies are driving our foundational bedrock, policies that determine our economic well-being. They determine our national defense mastery. We won't run a Navy on ethanol. We're not going to run an Air Force on extension cords. It's just absolutely insane. People think about climate as science. No, it is not. It's the big lever of government. It's big globalism. And it ain't favoring the U.S. There's absolutely nothing more impacting, nothing more effective, I think, than leveraging the climate scare. So these are scientists on with the alternative view than what the mainstream is telling us, that the science has been decided. They're like George Bush, science is the decider. There's certain scientists in certain circles, and the media only consults those certain scientists. They don't talk to other scientists. When was the last time you heard a scientist come on CBC who actually didn't agree with the climate narrative? The last time you heard, or on CTV, they had, okay, we have so-and-so, Dr. So-and-so, talking about the latest hurricane and what the climate did. And now we're going to have someone else who thinks this is just natural anyways. And let's hear what they have to say. No, you will not hear that on mainstream news, although there's thousands and thousands of scientists out there that say we're going too far with this. And it hasn't been settled yet. Okay. So for a kind of a more lighter look at that, John Stossel used to be on, have you ever heard of 60 Minutes? A show, I believe it was on CBS. 60 Minutes. He was a main reporter on that. He has a bit of a take on this. We've seen this on the show before. For those who watch the show a lot, this will be a rerun. But for those that are just joining us for the first time or aren't always on, it's a kind of just an interesting look at it. He's interviewing people about this very topic.
Climate change is a crisis, we're told. And anyone who's skeptical or raises any questions about the alarm is dismissed.
I'm going to bring out 2 people who agree with you, climate skeptic. I'm also going to bring out 96 other scientists.
The smug media mock so-called skeptics.
And what is the overwhelming view of the entire scientific community? Okay. Any response to that? Any response? I can't hear you over the weight of scientific evidence.
The consensus is so strong, there shouldn't even be a debate.
This whole debate should not have happened. I apologise to everyone at home.
Climate alarmists claim there's an
overwhelming scientific consensus.
but.
It's a manufactured consensus.
Researcher Judith Curry says climate scientists have an incentive to exaggerate risk. Why? What's in it for them?
Fame and fortune.
She knows about that because she once spread alarm about climate change. And the media loved her when she published this study saying there was an increase in hurricane intensity.
We found that the percent of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes had doubled.
Really? Doubled?
And so this was picked up by the media. The alarmists said, oh, here's the way to do it.
It being get the public alarmed.
Climate change is making hurricanes stronger and more destructive.
Tie extreme weather events to global warming.
So this hysteria is your fault.
Well, sort of. Not really. They would have picked up on it anyways.
But Curry's more intense hurricanes gave them fuel.
I was adopted by the environmental advocacy groups and the alarmists, and I was treated like a rock star.
What does that mean, treated like a rock star?
Oh my God, I was flown all over the place to meet with politicians and to give these talks and lots of media attention.
But then some researchers pointed out gaps in her research, years with low levels of hurricanes.
So like a good scientist, I went in and investigated all that stuff.
She realized her critics were right.
Part of it was bad data. Part of it is natural climate variability.
So you're the unusual researcher who looks at criticism of your paper and actually concluded they had a point.
They had a point for sure.
Then the ClimateGate scandal taught Curry that many researchers aren't so open-minded. Leaked emails showed university climate scientists conspiring to hide data.
It showed a lot of really ugly things. Avoiding Freedom of Information Act requests, trying to get journal editors fired from their job.
One email read, if you think this Yale professor is in the skeptics camp, get him ousted. Seeing emails like that made Curry realize that climate change fanatics had corrupted the science because there's a climate change industry set up to reward alarmism.
The origins go back to the 1980s and the UN Environmental Program.
Some UN officials had a specific agenda.
Anti-capitalism, they hated the oil companies, and they seized on the climate change issue as one to move their policies along.
The UN created what's called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
The IPCC wasn't supposed to focus on any benefits of warming. The IPCC's mandate was to look for dangerous human-caused climate change.
Obviously, if you're only looking for risk, that's what you'll find.
Then the national funding agencies directed all the funding in the field.
If you say we're all going to die and we got to spend a ton of money on this, you get funding. If you say we don't know, you don't get funding?
No, it's more subtle than that. The announcements of opportunity for funding are really tied to assuming that there are dangerous impacts.
So the researchers aren't stupid. They know what they need to say to get funding.
Exactly.
This is how manufactured consensus happens. Then, even if a skeptic does get funding, it's harder to publish because journal editors are alarmists.
About 10 years ago, the editor of the journal Science, she wrote this political rant about we need to stop emissions now that was published in Science. So what kind of message does that give? Promote the alarming papers and don't even send the other ones out for review.
Getting published is crucial to researchers because that's how they advance in academia.
If you wanted to advance in your career, like be at a prestigious university, get a big salary, have big laboratory space, get lots of grant funding, be director of an institute, well, there was clearly one path to go.
So alarmist researchers control the discussion. They publish lots of scary papers, and alarmist media jump on those. Time magazine says climate is everything. Good Morning America agrees.
Climate change is impacting everything from conception to pregnancy.
Transportation congestion, the size of frogs, Everything.
Airplane turbulence,
Expect turbulence like this to become more frequent due to climate change.
childhood obesity.
Climate change is making our children more obese.
Experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe.
Activists hear the media and freak out.
Children are starving.
The potential extinction of the human race.
Why don't other scientists who recognize the nonsense push back?
If they work at a university, it's going to be very uncomfortable for them.
Universities have become idiots and they punish people who tell the truth?
I mean, I felt the hostility.
Curry was a department chair at Georgia Tech until she concluded that fossil fuels aren't so terrible.
They want fossil fuels to go away.
When they made life uncomfortable for her, she looked for other university jobs, but was told,
nobody will hire you, because if you Google Judith Curry, everything that shows up with Judith Curry denier, Judith Curry serial climate disinformer. At that point, I started making my plans to transition 100% to the private sector.
She started this weather forecasting company. Now climate alarmists smear her as a climate denier doing it for the money. But she made more money at Georgia Tech.
If I was doing this for the money, I would have stayed at Georgia Tech and sucked up my big salary. But that's not who I am. My personal and professional integrity would not allow me to play that game.
Good for her. It's unfortunate that many university departments now shut down debate and reward alarmism. Curry agrees that climate change is a problem, but she says it's not a crisis. In a few weeks, I'll post our full interview with a more complete discussion about climate and what scientists really agree about.
So there you have it, right? It's the UN set up the special task force to look into the dangers of climate change. So if I set a task force up to look at only dangers of something and then publish that, then the media picks it up and says, yeah, the UN is saying all these dangers are happening. But that's because that's what the whole task force was looking for. Now, if you were to set up a business, let's say, and you were only looking for dangers of setting up a business, so I'm going to set up a hot dog cart on the corner over here, and I'm going to do a study on all the dangers of setting up a hot dog cart on the corner. And that's all. I'm going to look at all the dangers. Do you think I'm going to start a hot dog cart? But no, you don't just look at the dangers. You look at what's called a SWOT analysis, basically, right? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are some opportunities? Or what are some threats? So it's a more expanded view of what you're looking at. So let's say they got together and they said, instead of just looking at the threats of climate change, let's look at all the other things of climate change, possibly. And then everyone's like, wait a minute here. Maybe it's not such a bad thing. If they were to look at it and get scientists to spend time on looking at the whole thing. But no, they just focused on the threats and the bad stuff. It's like your kid. If you have kids or your parents or whatever, let's just focus on the bad side of dad. Let's talk about all his bad qualities. That's it. We're going to do a study on all the bad qualities of dad. We talked about this with the obituary that was written the other day from the person from Sudbury about her father and whether that was ethical or not or whatever, But said she's being honest. He wasn't a good guy, and his brother agreed, the dad's brother. So again, right? Can you imagine what kind of a person someone would think your dad was if you did a study on just all of the bad things that he's done and is, and the threats that he causes people? That's how we approach climate change. That's the foundation of how we got where we're at now. And then it just perpetuated after that. Just like this scientist was saying, that's a real scientist you just heard from. So it doesn't sound like that scientist agrees with the mainstream narrative. So is she the only one? Does she sound like a quack to you? Does she sound like she's way out in left field? She's a conspiracy theorist. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's just, she's just trying to deny everything. Again, there's that, and there's thousands of stories like that out there. And it's time, if people aren't aware of what's going on, we just listen to mainstream media. It sounds to me like propaganda 101. Like, that's what propaganda is. When you leave out something and you only say one side and you're not really looking. News should be looking at all the sides, asking all the questions. When I hear a news story or see a news story, I have more questions than what they are able to answer in the news story. I'm being told something. I'm being told this is the way it is and done. Okay, now I have questions. Is it really what you said? How did it get to be like that? Who are the players involved? Who's benefiting? Who's the victim? Who's the perpetrator? All these things I have questions about, and I need to dig deeper, right? But our news today, shame on our news today, because they only take one side. You'll see it with the safe consumption site here in Sudbury. It only saves lives, and there's nothing else it does that's no bad things come of it, right? In the news, in the mainstream news. They've all decided this all saves lives and it needs money. End of story. Well, we're not going to stay there. We're going to talk about it next week. We're going to unpack it. We're going to look at it from all different points of view. And maybe we come to a different conclusion, and maybe the people that are involved in that, their lives can be better because maybe we have a solution. Maybe there's more solutions. Maybe they're part of a solution, but they're just trying to be the only solution right now, right? So if we just live in a tunnel and we have, blinders on, horses wear them to keep them going on a certain path. And unfortunately, our news and our mainstream narratives today put those blinders on that similar to what horses have, and you can only see the road ahead of you. You can't look left and you can't look right. You just take our word for it. It's been decided for you. All science speaks with one voice. You can only listen to one solution. It's already been decided. Move on. And now let's do something. That's what a lot of people are saying. We're done talking about it. It's time to do something. You don't conduct your life like that at home. You don't just have one person come up with one scenario and everyone just, if you do, it's what's called a dictatorship. Your home can be also run like a dictatorship if one person just it does what they want and then forces everyone to go along with it. We like to everybody does their own investigating in our home. Everyone feels, and then when we decide to do something, everyone's kind of on board. Maybe some people influence other people and say, maybe you should try something new just for once or whatever. But again, no one's forced to do anything. They're forcing our society down a certain road. So yeah, we can find out things when we ask questions. And I think we just need to continue to ask questions and find the answers. And it's getting harder and harder with Bill C-11, Bill C-18, right? So now news and any other alternative voices are being shut down. We see what's going on there. So our mainstream news is propaganda. It's being funded by our tax dollars. And so why would they go against anything of what the government wants them to say? Really, that's terrible. Now they're shutting down the other news sources that could possibly, just call attention to something like the Nazi in our parliament the other day. That was a independent media that uncovered that. And then it went mainstream because they had to talk about it. If it wasn't for independent media, we wouldn't even have known of that story, right? So anyways, that's the show for the day. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for being with us. Stay tuned now for Earshot Daily on CKLU 96.7 FM. Have a great Wednesday, everyone, and stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Ciao.